Counter-Strike's ESL Pro League is a tournament series that has been the combined efforts of the Electronic Sports League and formerly ESCA, now turned Faceit, to bring us 18 seasons and counting of competition from the best teams in the world. The Pro League was first announced as a small $48,000 LAN tournament, limited to only 16 European teams. It quickly grew to a prize pool of $500,000 and opened up to any teams, making it the biggest CSGO league for any teams in these regions to compete in. Today, 32 teams all gather to compete under a small studio LAN environment in Malta, with the prize pool now of $850,000. But with 18 seasons, the tournament has a long history of different formats, different hosts, locations, and of course, different winners. So in this video, we'll be going over every ESL Pro League winner. As I mentioned, the original Pro League had a small prize pool of $48,000 and was limited to only European teams. Formerly known as Pro League Winner, 8 teams were invited by ESL, and the other 8 through online qualifiers in their respective regions. Prior to the event starting, there were a lot of changes to the actual final list of teams. Team LDLC became Team Envious, while former Team Dignitas became TSM. NIP had decided to pull out of the tournament, opting to instead use the time to go on vacation, so they were replaced by Finnish Team 3D Max. At Mouse Sports, the German qualifier winners were disqualified for having played with SMN, a player who the week previous had just received a VAC ban. They were replaced by runner-ups Pensa Esports, and this was the actual complete list of teams competing in this event. During the first few years of the Pro League, teams had to compete through an online phase of the league before reaching the offline phase. The 16 teams were split into groups of 8, and then the top 4 from each will qualify for the LAN finals after winning their matches in either the upper or lower brackets. The first ever Pro League was held in Germany inside of the ESL studio itself. The group stage format was the same as before, and the playoffs were all single elimination best of 3 matches. Once again, TSM and NV reached the playoffs first. I should mention that TSM were playing with a stand-in, a young up-and-coming Cadian replacing Device, who was missing the tournament due to catching a virus. This was the matchup for the semifinals, and while NV and TSM were swift in their groups, they both failed to impress in the playoffs, falling short against both teams. Navi vs Titans were now secured in the finals. Kenny S vs Guardian going all 3 maps. Navi was able to come back on Mirage, and Titan responded by beating them 16-7 on Cash, losing 0 rounds on the T side. But unfortunately for Titan, Navi were the better team that day and won the Cobblestone to become the first ever ESL Pro League winners. The very first Pro League, and it set the foundation for the tournament series it would soon become. A little over a month after Pro League Winner came to an end, ESL announced they had joined together with ESCA to open up the league to the NA region and bring with it a $1 million prize pool spread across the next 2 seasons. The new league would feature 24 teams, 12 from both regions. The regions would be split and compete in weekly matches amongst each other, with the top 4 from each region getting sent to the finals in Germany. 5th to 9th place qualify for the next season's online league, while the bottom 2 are sent to relegation matches, and the last to Premier. All in all, regions would play 22 matches before seeing who would advance. From the NA side, Cloud9, Keyed Stars, Luminosity, and CLG made it through to the finals, while on the European side, Fnatic, Virtus Pro, TSM, and Envious made it through. Once again, the finals were hosted at the ESL TV studio, but the format for the group stage this time was a little different. Teams were split up into 2 groups again, but rather than best of 3s, teams would only need to win 2 best of 1s to advance to playoffs. The highest ranked teams in the group stage were automatically placed in the semifinals, while the teams before them were placed in the quarterfinals. Cloud9 pulled off a 2-0 upset against Envy. They continued their dominance in the semifinals the next day against fellow North American org CLG and made it to the finals, where they would go up against the most dominant team at the time, Fnatic. Unlike the rest of the playoffs, the finals were best of 5, with Cobble, Cash, Overpass, Dust2, and Inferno being the final decider maps. Both teams never saw Inferno, however, as Fnatic were able to close out the map on Dust2 following a 2v3 from Olaf and Flusher to keep them in the match.
And stop Dust2 from slipping out of their hands here. Flusher holding up 15 health. Flashbang in. He's going to get the first kill. Keep spraying, but now Olaf is very low on health, and they have got no more grenades. There's no kit though on Cloud9. They've got almost no time if they die now. He jumps, he gets the shot, and that's probably going to be the round.
Fnatic took home $100,000, the biggest prize pool for a non-major at the time. In between Seasons 1 and Seasons 2 of the Pro League, Fnatic would win their 3rd major, but following disappointing results at the next major, Fnatic would sign Dennis from G2 Kingwin, with IGL duties falling onto Flusha. Despite their new signing heading into Season 2, Fnatic were the #1 team and would have to fight to retain their title from last season with the addition of a new player.
It is. It's incredible. And I hope they keep that going in the next couple.
The format for this season was similar to last. The 2 regions were once again split up into 2, with the top 4 teams of each division being sent to the finals. This time the finals wouldn't be held in Germany, but instead under the ESL studio in Burbank, California. A total of 22 matches were played amongst all teams. On the European side, the top 4 consisted of TSM, Fnatic, Navi, and Envious. On the North American side, the teams advancing were Team Liquid, Luminosity, Conquest, and CLG. The format for the offline phase was changed slightly with the removal of the quarterfinals, Now only 2 teams from the 2 groups would be allowed to advance. This season saw no NA representation in the playoffs, with all of them failing to advance. In the semifinals, Navi vs Envy ended on map 2 after a 22-18 finish on Cobblestone. Fnatic would also 2-0 their opponents. Team Question Mark, a temporary name being used by the TSM players who had just recently left the team. In another best of 5, this one went the distance. After 2 comebacks from Fnatic, they were up 2-0 and needed just one more map. Navi were able to even the score 2-2 after a stomp on Mirage and another tight game on Train. But despite their best efforts, Fnatic put an end to their dreams on Cobblestone, beating them 16-6, becoming back-to-back Pro League winners. Following this season of Pro League, ESL will once again bring changes to the prize pool and location where the finals will be held at. $1 million was announced for the first 2 seasons, but with the success of both, ESL revealed that now $1.5 million will be given out across the next 2 seasons, $519,000 for 8 teams in the finals. In addition to this, the finals were now being held in London with a crowd of about 2,000 people for the playoffs. We see some familiar faces from last season trying again to win it all, as well as the addition of new orgs into the Pro League on both sides. The top 4 teams advancing from the European side are NIP, former TSM, now Astralis, Fnatic, and ex-Titan, now G2. For NA, major winners Luminosity, Cloud9, Optic Gaming, and Team Liquid all made it to the finals. Cloud9 and Astralis each bombed out of their respective groups. Then Optic and Liquid both failed to make playoffs, giving us the 4 teams of NIP, Luminosity, G2, and Fnatic. For the first time, both semi-final best of 3s won all 3 maps for both series, with Luminosity and G2 pushing their way into the finals. An intense final the whole way through, G2 and Luminosity played 6 hours of Counter-Strike across all 5 maps, despite 2 crazy clutches from Shox on 2 separate maps to keep the dream alive.
And he has been top fragging for a very long time here on Dust 2. It's on Shox in a 1-on-3 to try and keep it alive, otherwise we'll go to a 5th map in the grand finals. Shox tabs out 1, and that's a deadly kill. Goes for the 2nd, and he's moving closer, looking for the quad clutch here. FNX, the last man alive, he's going to tap the bomb once. Shox You've got to be kidding, he takes the quad kill. It's all on Shox. He picks up 1 and goes back for more. He has no grenades. Luminosity in overtime here, looking for the shot. Shox gonna pick up 1 more. Triple for him. Oh, he gets the quad kill. Are you kidding me, Shoxy? He gets every single one.
A Fallen-led Luminosity team beat them on the 5th map, winning their last trophy and a new first-place prize pool of $200,000. This would be the last trophy that Luminosity would win before becoming SK Gaming in the future seasons. Changes all across the board happened prior to Season 4. Due to the rising number of teams entering the scene at the time, the number of slots for each region was up from 12 to 14. This now meant that 12 teams could qualify for the finals rather than the usual 8. Teams now had an even greater penalty for falling low in the regional rankings, however. Teams ranked 1 through 11 would keep their slots in the Pro League, while 12 to 13th were sent straight to relegation, and the last team was sent even further back to ESCA Premier. That's just the format changes. Now let's talk about some team changes and new teams joining the league. Heroic make their Pro League debut. Future Navi/Cloud9 star Electronic joins Flipside Tactics. And in North America, Tempo Storm became Immortals. Luminosity would be acquired by SK Gaming. Stanislaw replaces Daps on Optic. And Cloud9 were bringing Stewie2K and Automatic. From NA, the teams that will qualify are Cloud9, Immortals, SK Gaming, Optic Gaming, NRG, and Liquid, who took the place of Renegades, who forfeited their slot due to conflict with the Asia Minor. And from Europe's side, teams are Fnatic, NIP, Mousesports, FaZe, Envious, and Dignitas. Fnatic would later also choose to skip out of the event. Season 4 of the league was hosted in Brazil, Sao Paulo. Teams were split up into 2 groups of 6, with 3 teams from each group advancing. That's right, the quarterfinals are back. On one side of the bracket is NIP versus Envy, and on the other side is the NA matchup of Cloud9 versus Optic. Both matches end in 2-0 with NIP and Cloud9 advancing towards the semis. Where waiting for them are Mousesports and SK Gaming. Cloud9 would sweep their way back to the finals for a second time, and so would SK after a 2-1 finish against NIP. 4th time is the charm for Cloud9, however, who not only won their first LAN, but also the first international LAN for North America on the home soil of their opponents. After failure to qualify for the finals, Astralis would announce that Kerrigan would be removed from the team for the remainder of the season, and he would soon find his way onto FaZe, a team he would find much greater success, but that's for later. We made it to Season 5, and for the first time, the finals will be held in Dallas, Texas. The format is identical to the one from the last season, with 11 teams from last season returning in each region, and 4 fresh new teams joining them for another 3 months of online matches. Just like the last season, however, many changes to teams before, during, and after the Pro League occurred. Former Dignitas was acquired by Danish Org North. After 2 years on Mousesports, Nico leaves and joins FaZe Clan. He was replaced by Chris J, who was taken off the bench, and then later, Mouse signed Robs as his first exposure to the Tier 1 scene. SK replaced FNX with Phelps. Fnatic would re-sign JW and Flush to the team in place of Disco Doplin and Twist, so on and so forth. In NA, TSM would be acquired by Team Misfits. On Team Liquid, Hiko and Pimp would both leave, in their place being Stanislaw from Optic and Twist from Misfits. Hiko and Stanislaw practically swapped roles in their respective teams, a deal that put Hiko and Optic for a grand total of 1 month. Advancing to the finals from Europe were North, G2, Mouse Sports, Fnatic, Navi, and Envy. And in NA, SK, Liquid, Immortals, Energy, Cloud9, and Optic. Similarly to last season, 3 teams from each group would be moving up to the playoffs, but there was a potential that multiple teams could end up with the same score. So to determine who would advance, they would play tiebreaker matches. 2 teams were randomly chosen to face each other on train, and then the winner of that match would face the remaining team. These matches were all best of ones, with the starting money being $10,000, and it was first to 6. Group A ended in a tie between Envy, Fnatic, and SK Gaming. Envy and SK would advance to the playoffs, joining G2 from Group A, while on Group B, it ended with no tiebreaker needed with North, Mouse Sports, and Liquid. G2 and North were grouped immediately in the semis, so playoffs consisted of Mouse versus SK and Envy versus Liquid. SK sweep Mouse Sports to advance, while Envy and Liquid take it to 3, with Liquid advancing following a dominant third game. The next day, G2 beat SK 16-12 on both maps, while North closed in on overtime at map 2 19-17. The grand finals was now a best of 5 series against G2 and North. The French G2 led the series the entire way, with North being able to only pick up the third map before G2 won it all on Inferno 16-3. G2 are now ESL Pro League Season 5 champs. Following this victory, G2 would win one other grand final and make appearances in many more, but from 2017 to 2022, G2 won no Tier 1 trophies. Sorry for spoiling the next season, but Season 6 wasn't won by G2, instead by a familiar face under a new name. In between Seasons 5 and 6 of the Pro League, ESL announced multiple changes such as the announcement of the Intel Grand Slam, and now the inclusion of Super Weeks into the online phase of the league. Super Weeks meant that teams would have to play matches Tuesday to Sunday rather than the usual Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. These weeks were definitely more grueling for teams, and you can see by the online records how it affected their ability to win match after match. 11 of the top European teams from last season are back, along with Godsent, Hellraisers, and Big. And in NA, the league welcomed new teams, Splice, Ghost Gaming, and Rogue. Teams on both regions experienced massive changes. Starting with the European side, FaZe Clan added Guardian and Olafmeister in place of Alu and Kiyoshima, forming the ultimate CSGO super team. Navi also lost Seized, but he would later rejoin along with Zeus from Gambit. Mouse Sports signed Sunny and Stiko to the team. North would remove Magist from the roster and replace him with Valde. In NA, Shroud and Nothing were both moved to the bench to make way for Tarek and Rush taking their spots. Optic signed Magisk, Alu, Freiburg, and HS to their team. Nafly is transferred from Optic over to Renegades, and Cadian would join Hiko's team Rogue. Cirque joins Energy, and Immortals would forfeit the Pro League. After another 7 weeks of online matches, the teams advancing were Fnatic, North, FaZe Clan, Astralis, NIP, and Hellraisers, all from Europe. And from NA, Optic, SK Gaming, Liquid, Energy, Misfits, and Luminosity. The group stage saw no tiebreaker necessary, with FaZe Clan and SK both topping their respective groups and would have a day off while preparing for the semis. Following behind them in the quarterfinals was Fnatic vs Optic and Hellraisers vs Misfits. In a close matchup between the first two, Fnatic would advance after closing out map 3 16-14. Misfits, however, swept Hellraisers and would play the next day against SK. FaZe and SK continued their dominance and swept through their opponents, setting up for a best of 5 finals between a newly formed powerhouse and a team that has proved that they are one of the best already. FaZe would take the lead, winning the first game, but SK would go on to win the next 3 in a row, securing their second ESL Pro League trophy.
Says no. And SK in 3. And the Season 6 champions Fallen and SK.
Season 6 was one of the last tournaments of 2017, and next season's winners would be a team that would forever change Counter-Strike. Season 7 was heading back to Dallas at the Verizon Theater, with matches being exclusively streamed to Facebook. On top of this, ESL lowered the number of teams capable to join from the NA region down to 12, due to Team Misfits and CLG not renewing their license to be officially part of the league. ESL also brought with Season 7 a massive change to the divisions. As you may have now noticed, up until now, I have only been mentioning European and American divisions. But with this new season, they created the Asia Pacific Division, which encompassed 3 sub-regions, Southeast Asia, China, and Australia/New Zealand, as well as the Latin American League known as LAA League. Just as before, the top teams from each division would advance to the finals, which saw yet another player increase from 12 teams to 16 now eligible for the offline finals. The 2018 season saw even more huge changes to teams. Astral would sign Magisk. On FaZe, Alameister was taking a leave of absence, and in his place is Exist, who was moved to the bench on NIP in replace of Dennis. G2 were using Mixwell for a temporary 5th player in replace of Shox. In NA, after winning Boston 2018, Skadoodle is moved to the inactive C9 roster, but after Sui's decision to leave and join the Brazilian squad SK, Skadoodle is brought back along with FNS. NRG signed Ethan to their team. Team Liquid signed Taco, replacing Steel, who was being brought back to Luminosity Gaming. In addition, Nafly joins Liquid from Team Renegades, where he is currently the longest tenured player on the team. Going to the finals are 6 teams from Europe, 6 from North America, and then 2 from the Asia Pacific League and LA League. For the finals, there were 2 groups, both consisting of 8 teams. Opening matches are best of 1s, with the remaining matches being best of 3s. As before, teams who topped their group stage were instantly placed in the semifinals, with runner-ups being placed in the quarterfinals. The 6 teams to advance are Navi, FaZe, and Mouse Sports from Group A, and then from Group B, Astralis, Liquid, and SK Gaming. Both Team Liquid and FaZe advanced to the semifinals following a 2-0 sweep for both teams. Waiting for Liquid is Navi, and for FaZe is Astralis. Liquid and Astralis both deliver a 2-0 sweep to their opponents, and the best of 5 grand finals is now Astralis versus Liquid. Now in the year 2018, Astralis and Liquid would meet in the grand finals multiple times, but unfortunately for the NA team, Astralis would dismantle them every time, with this being no exception. Astralis were now winners of ESL Pro League Season 7, only dropping 1 map in the grand finals throughout the whole event. This would count as the second win they needed to be halfway towards the Intel Grand Slam, an achievement they would reach by the end of the year. Pro League Season 8 was the last major tournament of the 2018 season. After winning the previous season, Astralis would later win IEM Chicago, putting them 1 tournament win behind Season 1 of the Grand Slam. The Pro League was hosted in Odense, with Astralis being the clear favorites to win the whole event. The format for both the online and offline phases of the tournament were similar to the last season, and with more and more teams joining, you can probably tell it's starting to become near impossible to list off all the changes to rosters, so I'm just quickly going to fire through the most important ones. Olafmeister is back on FaZe, Exist was signed to Fnatic along with the young Brolin, G2 allowed Mixwell to explore other options, while returning with Shox and Smith in replace of Apex and NBK. In NA, Ghost Gaming was formed around former iBuyPower player Steel, who had recently been unbanned from all non-Valve sponsored events. The contracts with the SK players had expired and they decided to re-sign with MIBR. Tarek would later join. Cloud9 signed Flusha and Golding from Fnatic. Renegades signed Liaz and Gratisfaction to their team. In the finals, there would be 7 teams from Europe, 6 from North America, 2 from the Asia Pacific region, and 1 from South America. There are again 8 teams in each group. From Group A, Astralis won their initial best of 1 match and will later top the group stage. Following them is Liquid and Renegades, making it through to the playoffs. From Group B, MIBR topped their groups, followed by Mouse Sports and Navi. MIBR and Astralis both have a 1-day break due to them being instantly placed in the semifinals, while the quarterfinals consist of Renegades versus Mouse Sports and Team Liquid versus Navi. Mouse Sports advanced to the semifinals, beating Renegades 2-1, even after the Australian team were up 1-0. Team Liquid would also advance after 2 quick, clean sweeps against Navi. The next day, the semifinals would come to another quick finish, as both series ended 2-0. The closest game of the day was Map 1, ending 16-12, while the rest of them, the losing team, never even made it past single-digit rounds. The last day of Pro League Season 8 was now here with Astralis versus Liquid in yet another best-of-5 finals. Liquid won Map 1 16-8, but Astralis do Astralis things that would win the next 3 maps in a row to secure them the Season 8 of Pro League. With this win, they also finished the last tournament win needed to complete the Intel Grand Slam, making them the first ever IGS winners. Taking home an additional $1 million along with the Season 8 prize money. The 2018 season was one of the craziest that the game had experienced up to that point, and with Astralis and Liquid fighting for the #1 spot, would Astralis successfully defend their back-to-back wins with a third, or would Liquid finally beat them to prove they are a trophy-lifting caliber team? Season 9 brought with it the biggest format change that the Pro League had ever seen. And officially starting this season, the regular season and finals would both be held offline, with the European division being hosted under the ESL studio in the UK, while the Americas was played in Burbank in the now defunct Intel Esports Arena. Asia Oceanic matches would still be played online. Each region would now consist of 2 groups of 4 teams. In Europe, winners of each group would automatically qualify for the finals in France, while 2nd and 3rd place would move on to round 2 of the group stage. In round 2, there would be 2 groups of 4 teams, and the best 2 teams from each group would advance to the finals. However, since America had 2 less slots in the league than Europe, only 1 team from each group in round 2 would advance. Round 1 stays the same. Asia Oceanic matches saw only 1 team from each region make it through. Time for some roster changes. On G2, Smiths, Existence, and later Body are removed from the team, and in their place is Lucky, Jax, and Amanek. FaZe Clan announced the benching of their IGL Kerrigan, and later head coach Robin steps down and is temporarily replaced by Adren and then later Yenko. Big signs Turkish star Xantaris. Stavin joins Heroic. Jugi replaces Cadian on North. Mousesports bench Chrische, Sunny, and Stiko to bring in Woxic, a young Frozen, and Kerrigan, with Chrische later coming off the bench. In North America, Cloud9 signed and released Kiyoshima, and with Flusha leaving, they signed Vice and Cajun B. Team Liquid transferred Taco and Coach Zeus to MIBR in exchange for Stewie 2K back in NA. The next day, Liquid would also sign Adren as their new coach. Tarek would be signed to Team NRG. Back to the tournament. This was the complete list of teams attending the finals. The format for the group stage remained the same as the previous season, with the 16 teams being split up into 2 groups based on the regular season placings. Group A and B winners were NRG and Mousesports, while quarterfinals consisted of G2 vs FaZe and Liquid vs Astralis. Without their IGL, G2 easily dismantled FaZe Clan, winning without dropping a map. Liquid vs Astralis followed up later in the day. Astralis took the 1-0 lead, winning map 1 overpass. Liquid were easily able to win map 2 without letting the other team earn double-digit points. Map 3 was considerably close, however the form from Liquid was unbeatable and they carried along to the semifinals where they would face off against Mousesports. On the other side of the bracket, NRG vs G2 came down to map 3 on overpass, where it would be G2 that would be our first finalist. Liquid vs Mousesports ended in a sweep in Liquid's favor despite Mouse's best efforts to bring the game back on Nuke in overtime. The finals are now set up as G2 vs Liquid, France vs NA in a best of 5 grand finals. Map 1 started off strong with Team Liquid winning in overtime, and then in the next map proceeded to dismantle G2 16-3. Finally, G2 would win a map, Nuke, but ultimately Liquid would come out on top following 3 overtimes on Inferno. This one would be the 4th of the year, and the 3rd out of the 4th needed to complete Season 2 of the Intel Grand Slam. And just 2 weeks later, Liquid would complete their missing piece by winning ESL Cologne 2019 and becoming the fastest team to ever win an Intel Grand Slam. Season 10 is where I would say the Pro League of today is truly beginning to form, with the trophy of this season becoming the staple trophy used in every season since. The format remains identical to Season 9. For the roster changes this season, Na'Vi acquires Boom Blitz in replace of Edward, and they also reacquire Guardian from FaZe Clan. FaZe trialed their future star, Opera Brokey, for this event, one of the first in his 4 years now on the team. G2 released Shocks and acquired Nexa and Hunter from Crazy. Heroic transferred Blame Up to the NAR Complexity, part ways with Freiburg, and signed both Snappy and Katie into the team. Lastly, on Fnatic, Flusha and Golden are brought back. In the European groups for round 1, Maus, Heroic, Astralis, and Na'Vi all made it through their respective groups. And in round 2, G2, FaZe, North, and Fnatic filled in the remaining slots. Once again, the Americas have less slots, so only 6 teams total qualify from this group, those being MIBR, Evil Geniuses, Team Liquid, Shark Esports from round 1. And in round 2, ATK and 100 Thieves qualified for finals. Lastly, again, Greyhound and Tyloo make it through from their respective regions. The group stage was played in the Odense Congress Center, while the playoffs were played in the same arena as last year. With all 16 slots in the finals filled up, the groups could now be made. In Group A, Na'Vi swept to qualify for the semifinals, dropping only 1 map to Evil Geniuses along the way, who went on to the quarterfinals, followed by Fnatic, who made it through the lower bracket stage. In Group B, Astralis placed first for instant qualification, followed by last season's winners of Liquid. Mousesports made it through by the lower bracket of their group. The matchup in the playoffs went as Liquid vs Fnatic and EG vs Mousesports, with Na'Vi and Astralis facing the victors of either. Fnatic pulled off an impressive 2-0 sweep against the returning champions. Mousesports would advance 2-1, performing a 16-0 in the process on the 3rd map.
Gonna be one, but Zerk does draw blood first. EG, another frag, another chance. Just 3 remain to stop that 16-0, but wants it. Asta's frozen! Surely not like this! They're defusing. No, they're not. Zerk's off it, and Mouse have done it! 16-0! 16 rounds of play, and not a single round goes the way of the North American.
The semifinals were now set up as Na'Vi vs Fnatic and Mousesports vs Astralis. In a back and forth first map, Na'Vi win Inferno 16-4. Nuke is now map 2, and while the first half was close, Fnatic retake the second half and close out the map 16-11. The final map in the series is Overpass, where Fnatic dominated the first half 11-4 before closing it out 16-6. Fnatic were now in the finals of Pro League and will face either Astralis or Mousesports.
Astralis versus Mousesports in a semi-final. We see Fnatic in the grand finals. Are we going to get that Swedish-Danish derby?
Astralis had the crowd rooting for them against Mousesports, whose only Dane was Kerrigan, just as eager to get a win on home soil. Map 1 Train, a map that ended in double overtime in favor of Mousesports, who crawled their way back from a 10-5 deficit in the first half. Overpass is next up in the map pool. Half 1 ended 7-8 in favor of Mouse, but Astralis pulled off a near-perfect second half, losing only one round in the process after a consecutive 8. Finally, the last map between the two teams would be Dust 2. Astralis continued their great form following their second match and at one point are one round behind map point, 14-8. Mousesports bring the game back round by round, winning 8 rounds in a row to eliminate Astralis and make it to the finals where they will go head-to-head against Fnatic.
Surely this is it! Mousesports have done it! They're going to the grand finals!
The next day, Kerrigan and company put on a dominating performance, sweeping Fnatic 3-0. While Fnatic showed good form during the first half of the matches, they failed to keep up with the pace of Mousesports, who are now the winners of ESL Pro League Season 10. This should be the first out of 3 other tournaments that this lineup will win together, the last of which being one of the last tournaments before the entire world had to get shut down. The original plan for Season 11 of the Pro League was for the regular season to be played under a studio lane in Malta, and for the playoffs to be at the First Bank Center in Denver, both of which had to be cancelled, and while it was hoped that the finals were going to be able to be played in Europe, ultimately this season's and the preceding seasons after would be online only and split up regionally. Season 11 also brought with it a big change as to determining what teams would be competing in the Pro League. The Livray Agreement was an agreement between ESL and some of the top teams in the world, guaranteeing partnered teams permanent slots in the ESL season and other ESL branded tournaments. In Europe, partner teams took up 10 out of the 18 slots for the season, with the rest being invited based on their ESL world ranking and on their placement in the last season. In America, partner teams took up 3 out of the 6 slots. Teams were essentially now able to buy their way into the league, and for some teams, it would feel as though they were taking up slots away from more deserving teams. No huge roster moves to report this season, with the only big one being in between the last 2 seasons. Navi had added Perfecto in replace of Guardian. In the European League, teams were split into 3 groups of 6, where during Stage 1, each team would play 5 best-of-3s. The teams that placed first in their groups would advance immediately to Stage 2, while second and third place would face each other in decider matches. In Stage 2, the remaining 6 teams would face off in a single round-robin format. The first place team was put immediately into the grand finals, with second and third place qualifying for semifinals. Much like the early days of the Pro League, no quarterfinals for this online season. Anyways, in another rematch semifinals against Astralis and Mousesports, Mousesports once again reaches finals after a 2-1 finish against their opponent, even taking another win on Dust 2 in Map 1. Fnatic vs Mousesports have met once again in a rematch grand finals of ESL Pro League Europe, and while last season Fnatic failed to win a single map, this best-of-5 series would go all the way, with Fnatic winning after coming back from a 1-2 deficit. The team was able to pull off a near-flawless victory in Map 4, winning 16-1. The writing was on the wall that Fnatic would be able to pull it off, and on Mirage, they secured the victory 16-12, winning Pro League Europe. In America, the group stage consisted of only one group, considering there was only 6 teams total in the American region. The top 2 teams in the groups would be placed in the upper bracket, and from there, the winner of that would go on to the grand finals. The 3rd and 4th place teams would proceed through the lower bracket, where again the winner of that would go on to the grand finals. The finals would turn out to be Liquid versus Evil Geniuses, and while the European side went all the way, Liquid made easy work of EG, winning Pro League America 3-0. Winners of their respective regions took home the first place cash prize, along with points towards the ESL Pro Tour and the Blast Premier Circuit, both of which would be later used to determine invitation to events from both tournament organizers. Season 11 was the first of 3 more seasons to come of online-only play, and now by the time of Season 12, more tournaments had been played using an online format, so people knew more or less what to expect coming into this next season of Pro League. In the announcement for Season 12, ESL had also revealed that they had expanded their partnership with Gaming Malta, and they would be hosting plans for the league beginning in 2021. But in the meantime, there was no traditional playoffs between international teams, as the regions were split up once more. Every region was given their respective league, with teams in the European and American leagues taking home from a much larger prize pool. Some teams were struggling to adapt to online play, and for some players, they had decided to take some time away from the game. For instance, in Astralis, Esatag is officially signed to the team after being brought in earlier in the year as a 6th man on the roster. On FaZe Clan, Olaf Meister steps down from the active roster, citing a lack of motivation. Mousesports bench Woxic and promote Bimus from their academy team onto the main team. Mouse even had to release their coach due to his usage of a spectator bug, allowing anybody using the bug to free roam around the map during matches. On the North American side, Team Liquid benched their IGL and longtime player Nitro, acquiring Grim in the process. The team would also replace their head coach, switching from a Dren to broadcast analyst / commentator Moses. Cloud9 acquired the ATK lineup and are back to an NA core. In Europe, the league switches from 3 groups of 6 to only 2 groups of 8. All teams would be given the opportunity to face each other at least once, and then the top 4 of each group would be placed into the playoffs. Between groups A and B, the top 8 teams would be Navi, Big, ENCE, Heroic, followed by Astralis, Complexity, Team Spirit, and Mousesports. These teams were now in the playoffs, consisting of the upper and lower bracket. With Navi winning their opening match, they were quickly able to move through the upper bracket and found themselves in the finals of Pro League. Astralis lost their opening match 0-2 against Heroic and powered their way through the lower bracket, and in a rematch against Heroic, delivered a 2-0 of their own and have now made the finals of Pro League Europe. Since Navi were the upper bracket winners, they were going into the best of 5 already with a 1 map advantage, so really all they had to do was win 2 matches instead of the typical 3. Since map 1 was given by default, map 2 was Dust 2, and afterwards, Navi were now up 2-0. 1 map away from being winners. In a surprising turn of events though, Astralis were able to pull off a reverse sweep 3-2, and were now Season 12 Pro League winners. Even in map 4, when it looked as though Navi would come back after a 13-12 half, Astralis maintained their cool and pulled off something only the Danish team would be able to do. In the American League, as there were only 8 teams, there was also only 1 group total. Much like in Europe, there is an upper and lower bracket to the playoffs, in which the top 4 teams of the league would participate. These teams included Evil Geniuses, Furia, Liquid, and 100 Thieves. After a 2-0 victory in the upper bracket, Furia were now grand finalists for Pro League America, and after fighting through the lower bracket, 100 Thieves would be their opponent. The 1 map advantage applied to the American League as well, so map 1 was a default victory for Furia, and they ended up winning everything 3-0. The 2020 season is now wrapped up, and while the rest of the world was beginning to slowly open, Pro League has 2 more online seasons to get through. For Season 13, the format was different from the previous 2 online seasons as an attempt to make the online viewing experience less repetitive. There was now the group stage, the play-in stage, and the playoff stage. Groups were phase 1 of the tournament, with 4 round-robin groups of 6 teams. This meant that there were now 24 teams flat out competing in the league. The winning team of each group would then proceed to the play-in stage, where these teams would compete amongst each other to determine automatic semifinals placements, while the other teams were placed in the quarterfinals. Teams that were 2nd and 3rd in their groups advanced towards the round of 12. Here they would go head-to-head down towards the round of 8, and then lastly the quarterfinals, where the 2 winning teams would play against the playing-in round losers. Now before I get into what teams qualified and went through, it's time to look at some teams. FaZe Clan lose Nico to G2, but in the process acquired Twist from Liquid, whose replacement on that team was Brazilian star Fallen. FaZe's head coach Robin is reinstated after his ESIC ban has expired. Chris Shea is moved to the bench on Mousesports after acquiring 8-core, and later Mousesports would terminate Kerrigan's contract after a mutual agreement shortly after picking up Dexter from Team Renegades. On ENCE, Sunny and Jampy are benched on the team and Sergey steps down, citing a lack of motivation. ENCE would replace these players with Dodo, Snappy, and Diha. On and off, Navi would begin using Bit in replace of Flamey in official matches before he would officially join the starting lineup. Heroic benched Nico and Borup to make room for Refresh and Shush. And lastly, this marked the Pro League debut of Gambit, who after much success throughout the year with their academy roster, promoted them to the main lineup. Proceeding with the tournament, the 4 teams in the play-ins were Heroic, NIP, Gambit, and Astralis. Both Heroic and Gambit proceed with automatic qualification to the semis by sweeping their opponents, and now NIP and Astralis would wait for their opponents, who were competing in the round of 12. These were the matchups for the round of 12. And from these teams, the ones who wound up in the quarterfinals against NIP and Astralis were Furia and Complexity. The Brazilian squad made quick work of Astralis, ending the series 2-0 after a 16-2 finish on Train. And as for Complexity, they fell short against NIP after a close win on map 1 and a loss on map 2. 2 more days left in the Pro League, and the semifinals won as Heroic vs Furia and Gambit vs NIP. Both Gambit and Heroic maintained their perfect record in the Pro League so far, making it all the way to the finals, with neither team having dropped a single map in the process. The stakes were now set, a best-of-5 grand finals against the 2 best online teams. Say what you want about online CS, but you cannot deny that this grand final delivered. Starting off with map 1, before you know it, both teams are already on overtime. Heroic win map 1 in just a single overtime, and Gambit respond by taking map 2 dominantly 16-3. Map 3 Train is more of what you expect, with the game going on for a staggering 4 overtimes totaling 54 rounds played on a single map, before Heroic finally put an end to the match. Map 4 is won by Gambit 16-10, and now there is 1 map left. Mirage started off strong for Heroic, leading the first half 13-2. Teams switched sides and Heroic are quickly able to reach map point. Gambit begin winning round by round, and are even able to secure their 7th round win before.
And what did he do after that? That's nuts. So he actually shoots the AWP in the back of the head without anyone looking.
Gets the AWP and kills the guy CT.
Yeah. Oh my god, he's knifed him, and he's gotten away with the AWP. I'm starting to get nervous. There's no way, Kaden, you can't win Pro League like this! You can't win Pro League like this! No way! Exile's left, 40 seconds and the bomb's on A. Take your time, son, you're about to make the play of your career. Kaden, he's thinking about ramp. Jumping.
Saw him.
Exile gets the info, he just has to hit this shot and he's done it for Heroic. The leader, calling well above his years, clearing corners. Oh no! You're an animal!
One of the most memorable clutches, not just of the online era, but all of Counter-Strike, performed in front of an audience of nobody. Heroic took home the glory of first place, as well as an up prize pool of $200,000 and qualification for the Blast World Premier Finals. While the Blast World Finals were held offline, Season 14 was unfortunately held online only due to ongoing COVID restrictions, but by now ESL had begun the inclusion of extra content with players in the form of interviews or more relaxed challenges. Thankfully, the next season would be the last online-only Pro League to come. Season 14 was meant to be held in Malta, and while IM Cologne earlier in the year was held offline, this season was kept online once more. From Season 9 to Season 14, there were no new winners of the Intel Grand Slam. However, the 2021 year was undoubtedly dominated by Na'Vi under the helm of Boomblitch. The team had won 3 Intel-sponsored events, and the team were now just one event away from writing their name in history next to Astralis and Team Liquid. Na'Vi were set on winning this event just as any other team. The same 12 sponsored teams would be directly invited to another season of Pro League, with returning faces and fresh new ones making up the remaining 12. Season 14 brought huge roster changes similar to last season. Device was acquired by NIP, taking the spot of Knock, and Astralis pick up Lucky in his place. Polish Opera Hades is brought into Ents after Alu takes a leave of absence from the team. Fnatic become a Swenglish team after the benching of JW and Golden and the acquisition of Alex and Mezzi. Heroic would terminate their coach Hunden's contract following a breach of trust after his use of the coach bug. Now the group stage remained the same, but there was a huge format change to the playoffs. Gone was the play-in stage and round of 6, and now instead, teams that placed first in their groups directly qualify for the quarterfinals, while second and third place in groups were placed in a round of 12, where the winners of those matches would face whichever corresponding team made quarterfinals. These changes were made following community feedback, which meant that most everybody was pleased with the change. Since the group stage remained the same, the 4 group winners were Heroic, OG, Na'Vi, and Gambit. These teams were now placed in the quarterfinals and would wait while second and third place winners fought for a spot against them. From the round of 12 matchups, those victorious were Ents, Liquid, NIP, and Vitality. The playoff stage was now set. Vitality vs Gambit ended in another 2-0 sweep, seeing the French squad take the win against last year's runner-ups. OG vs NIP was pushed to map 3, which ended quickly on a 16-4 victory on Dust 2. Heroic vs Liquid was pushed to a third map, even ending in overtime in favor of the returning champions.
Make it Team Liquid be that semi-finalist, refresh as good as he's been, as much as he's given us. This is a Team Liquid victory, teed up. He's on for a third. Napfly dead as well. Find him. It's a guessing game. Stick on the bomb. Grim doesn't swing. He thinks it's a fake. Refresh with all 5, and we're going to overtime.
Lastly, for the quarterfinals is Na'Vi vs Ents, which ended in Na'Vi dominating them on both maps. The semifinals was held the next day and began with Na'Vi vs Heroic. The closest series Na'Vi has had yet up until this point. After both teams won their respective picks, the decider was on Nuke, where Na'Vi was able to steal the victory away from Heroic in the last few rounds. Vitality had a much easier series against OG, sweeping them to secure their matchup against Na'Vi in the finals. Another grand final is here, and the stakes are high for this one. Vitality could deny Na'Vi their Intel Grand Slam, while Na'Vi can practically feel the gold bar already in their hands. In a grand final that went for 128 rounds, things got very intense. Whichever map was picked by a team was won by that team, with Na'Vi winning Dust 2 and Nuke, while Vitality won Inferno and Overpass, in a more dominating fashion than Na'Vi, mind you. Map 5 is on none other than Mirage. Despite having a bad performance on the previous map, Electronic woke up for Na'Vi on map 5, and him, along with the rest of the team playing to their peak, were able to put an end to Vitality's comeback attempt and win not only Pro League Season 14, but Season 3 of the Intel Grand Slam. With assigning a bit to the team, he became the youngest player to become an Intel Grand Slam winner, and with the conclusion of Season 14, Na'Vi would end the year continuing their dominance, and by the beginning of next season, a new challenger would rise to dethrone the team. Before the beginning of Season 15, ESL announced another format change of the season. The league would expand to an additional 10 teams, bringing the total number to 34 teams in the league. With the increase in size, there was also an additional week of competition along with an increase to the prize pool, now at $825,000 for the main stage. 16 out of those 34 teams would earn their spot in the Pro League by winning ESL Pro Tour Challenger events. ESL Challenger is just a renaming of DreamHack Open events, and to qualify for these Challenger events, you need to go through the Challenger League, formerly ESCA Premier. The biggest change saw the inclusion of a conference stage to start week 1 of the league. The conference stage was where teams qualified through Challenger and National Challenger Leagues. The top 3 teams went on to the main group stage during weeks 2 to 5, and the last week was dedicated to the playoffs. All of this was to be played on land, taking place in Dusseldorf, Germany. This season, pretty much every major team had massive changes going into the league. Astralis would lose even more of their core players as Dupree, Magisk, and the coach Zonic were moved to the bench and eventually left for Vitality. Astralis would replace them with Config, Blksmith, and Trace. They would also ditch the whole 6-man roster idea, letting go of Bubsky and benching Lucky, signing Farleague to complete their full roster for the season. Complexity is back to a full NA roster, acquiring the extra salt lineup along with Grimm Jr. from Liquid and Furia. Liquid bench Stewie and Fallen, and bring back Nitro as he comes out of retirement, along with Shocks and OC. Ent, G2, Mouse, FaZe, everyone had roster changes. Now onto the actual tournament. From the conference phase, Movistar Riders, Godsent, and Sprout proceeded as the last remaining teams to qualify for the group stage. 24 teams now in the group stage. The group winners go as following: NIP, Furia, Movistar, and Navi. These teams were now set firmly in the quarterfinals. Teams competing for a spot in the quarterfinals were Heroic vs Liquid, Fnatic vs Ents, Entropic vs Astralis, and FaZe vs Players, who really were Gambit, but due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, had to bear a neutral name for the event due to the org being sanctioned by ESL. Liquid and Ents were convincingly able to sweep their opponents and would further advance. Astralis and FaZe were also able to get the job done, just taking a bit longer to do so. Now in the actual quarterfinals. While Liquid was able to sweep Heroic, NIP was a better team that day and would further advance to the semifinals following 3 close games against the NA squad. Movistar Riders won map 1 against Ents, however Snappy's team would respond by not even letting them get double-digit rounds across the next 2 games. Astralis would also win the first map against Furia. However, the Danish squad would not be able to keep up with them in the next 2, and Furia would now await their opponent between returning champions Navi and a newly revamped FaZe Clan. FaZe Clan would sweep Navi, making way for a new contender for the title. The Pro League is now slowly coming to an end, with the semifinals just around the corner. NIP vs Ents start us off, and while NIP had a good form all tournament long, Snappy and his squad would win 2-0 after a dominant nuke and a close ancient. Furia vs FaZe could have gone either way, but FaZe would ultimately be the victor after 2 comebacks on Inferno and Mirage. Finally, the finals were all set up, and our 2 contenders, Ents vs FaZe Clan, were here for a best of 5. FaZe would win on map 1 Vertigo, Ents' map pick, and Ents followed by winning FaZe's pick Overpass. While map 3 and map 4 began with halves ending in 7-8, FaZe took over the series and quickly ended both maps in regulation 16-9 and 16-12 respectively. Winning the Pro League gave FaZe a first place prize of $190,000, along with instant qualification to the Blast World Final. More importantly, FaZe are now halfway away from winning Season 4 of the Intel Grand Slam, with competition only being Vitality up until this point. The only major change to come for Season 16 would be to the conference stage, which is now being hosted on LAN at DreamHack Summer 2022 in Sweden, separate from the league itself, which was returning to Malta for the next 3 years and subsequent seasons. The conference stage also now allowed the top 6 teams to make their way into the groups. Roster changes just get bigger and bigger as these seasons come to an end. Cloud9 pick up the ex-Gambit players. Navi are forced to part ways with Boomblitz following some controversy. In his place was SDY, who would stand in for Navi until that year's Rio Major. Heroic picked up Yabby after their benching of Refresh. G2 transferred Jax and Alexi B, replacing them with JKS and Huxi. Ents acquires Sampias and Valde, while Spinks is brought into Team Vitality, with this being the first tournament with the new finalized roster. And spoiler alert, they did really good. Vitality, along with G2, Mouse, and Cloud9, each topped their respective groups and would now await their opponent in the quarterfinals. Every series in the round of 12 was played up until the 3rd map, with Fnatic vs Liquid starting the day, followed by FaZe vs Complexity, where Complexity could have easily finished the series off 2-0. Liquid was able to win it out in map 3 following a rough showing on Overpass.
Honestly, that map is really tough, and they were owning us like so hard in practice. So even the amount of rounds that we got is an improvement from how those were going. So overall, good day.
Furia was no match against the slow and steady play of James Outsiders. Lastly, Na'Vi vs Heroic was littered with tech pauses, but after 2 close games, the game was ended by a knife from Simple. Now beginning the quarterfinals is Liquid vs Mouse. The experience of Liquid's core players proved to be beneficial in helping them secure a 2-0 over the newly revamped team. A confident Cloud9 are now in the quarterfinals against last year's champions, and after being down 0-1, they overtook the next 2 maps and phased out of the tournament. While Na'Vi won their map pick of Dust 2, G2 had no problem winning the series, with the next 2 maps both ending 16-9. Lastly, Vitality, with the addition of Spinks, were now leveled up and delivered a clean sweep against the future major winners. The next day, the semifinals beginning with Cloud9 vs Liquid. OC and Yekender both led the team in helping them secure a 2-1 victory after an insanely close 3rd map. On to G2 vs Vitality, and while this should have went to a 3rd map, no doubt, Vitality's form, especially Zaiwu, was far too good for G2 to keep up with.
Shot and then the assist from Hunter to bring down Spinks. It's just all on Megaskin side. What a nice run stepping out to help him, and now down to Zaiwu. 1 versus 2. If they can find him right now, they can get that defuse. He's gonna get the flick, but he's in the corner. Through the box.
Our grand finalists were now here, Liquid vs Vitality, and they would put on one of the most intense best of 5 finishes that the Pro League had seen. 2 back-to-back maps ending in overtime. The stars on both teams playing to their peak. This grand final delivered on all fronts.
Big nade as well. Takes Apex down to 51. Looks for the spray, but not gonna happen. It's Dupree that's gonna put the championship point on the line.
Ever since the addition of Majis, Dupree, and Zonic, the team had not won a single tournament yet. But all that would change when Spinks was added, as they were now Season 16 champions of ESL Pro League. This victory was critical for Vitality, who saw greater success later in the next year. And even after 2 additional roster moves, continued to win tournaments. But now we're getting into CS2 territory, and the next season of Pro League is where we would get our first glimpse at the future of the franchise. ESL just can't go 1 season without changing the format. I mean, they've changed the format so many times, I've lost count at this point. But now 44 teams make up the league, as the conference stage saw an expansion to include 5 regions and 7 new teams, 23 total in that stage. The group stage was now split into a triple elimination bracket, with all matches being best of 3s. Winners, like always, were placed in the quarterfinals. However, now only 2nd place teams, losers of the upper bracket finals, would be in the round of 12, as 3rd and 4th place teams, winners of lower and last chance brackets, will compete in a new round of 16 to determine the full list of competitors in the playoffs. Roster changes including Config having his contract terminated by Astral following a physical altercation. He would later end up on NIP, where he would join Alexi B from G2 and Hetrick from Na'Vi Juniors. Astral reacquired Device and is long awaited to come back to the scene. Nerds is acquired by ENCE shortly after they bench Valde. G2 have also switched coach roles over to their analyst Swami. Cloud9 bench interns while acquiring former Virtus Pro player Buster. From Group A were Cloud9 and outsiders from the upper bracket, and G2 and Fnatic, who had gone knocked into the lower and last chance bracket. Teams from Group B were the likes of Heroic, Mouse, Fury, and Movistar. Group C included Vitality and FaZe Clan, along with Brazilian teams Pain and 00 Nation. Lastly, from Group D were Force, ENCE, Na'Vi, and Liquid. One fun thing that ESL included with this season was bringing in players to the commentary team, allowing them to give their insight on the match as well as just letting their personality shine.
I imagine being the IGL and actually taking the P250 yourself. I think I should start doing that.
With Heroic, Force, Cloud9, and ENCE waiting patiently in the quarterfinals, the rest of the teams would have to proceed through 2 further rounds of playoffs. The round of 16 ended with relative ease, with 3 out of the 4 matches ending in 2-0, and the last match ending 2-1. These teams were Na'Vi, Furia, Pain, and G2. The following day would be anything than your ordinary day of ESL Pro League, as March 22nd, 2023 would be when Valve would reveal to the world CS2, bringing in mass hype, confusion, and unless you were a pro or a big streamer, chances are you didn't have access. And even if you were, chances are you still didn't have access.
But
Look, it's going through. There's a hole now.
Yeah,
When you shoot, there's a hole.
And there's no one way.
Get him over here, man.
ESL will confirm that the rest of this season and next season were to be played on Global Offensive in the last ever Global Offensive tournament. Teams couldn't be distracted on the new game yet. They have a tournament to win. And now in the round of 12, 3 out of the 4 end in sweeps, with Na'Vi, FaZe Clan, and ENCE proceeding with ease, while Mouse had a bit more work to do after being down to map against Pain. The quarterfinals are now here, with Cloud9 versus Mouse kicking it off. While Mouse had the map lead, Cloud9 kept their cool and secured the next 2 and made it smoothly into the semifinals. Facing them would be ENCE, who after a screaming match between the 2 captains, came out victorious on Vertigo in the last round of regulation.
To that. Oh, a good fight.
Zaiwu has to defuse. He has to
Leading it.
And
On the defuse. Nerds gets the double. Can he find Zaiwu? Not another one from Nerds! Unbelievable! Sphinx down! Nerds, a god among men!
What's up? Gilani! Hello, Gilani!
Next up on the list is Force versus FaZe, and in typical FaZe fashion, they struggled the first 2 maps before stomping out their opponents in the third. Lastly, Na'Vi delivered a surprising sweep against Heroic, who failed to deliver on the second map. Semi-final stage is here, with both series delivering a mix of close matchups and one-siders. FaZe Clan were saved by a crazy eco round from Rops.
Never seen before.
Yeah, and it does get the
This is
double
shady. This
from
is shady. He
Rob.
does know.
He doesn't know as Robs gets up. What? That is insane!
And Cloud9 overcoming their first map loss to win the remaining 2.
The bomb dropped by Axel. They might have the A side, but without the bomb, this round ain't happening. Axel still floating around in the toilets. He's playing the long game. Nafany's hit an entirely separate timing, and Axel flicks back around to find another. What a round from this man, making it happen for Cloud9 single-handedly.
These 2 are now our finalists, but for FaZe, they were going for more than just the ESL Pro League, as recalled that Season 15 gave them 2 out of 4 wins needed for the Intel Grand Slam. After that season, FaZe would win IEM Cologne, however failed to impress in all events after this, even bombing out of the Rio Major. Time was running out for FaZe to win the season of the Intel Grand Slam, with the announcement of CS2 and lands for the game coming to an end, so they fought and they fought hard. Map 1 Overpass was won by FaZe, who let Cloud9 catch up before closing the game out 16-13. Map 2 Inferno was won by FaZe, following a very dominant first half.
And this is happening unless Brokey can put a stop to it. Shots are missing. With each shot that sails past them, they're getting closer. There's one. The USP dinks. It's down to this. 20 seconds. Over the top. The round is denied.
Mirage went the way of Cloud9, and although they tried keeping Ancient close, FaZe played with purpose and were now Season 17 winners of the Pro League. Along with being the last Intel Grand Slam winners of Global Offensive, Twist also became the first player to ever win the Intel Grand Slam twice, doing so under 2 different jerseys. Next season of Pro League would put an end to an era of Counter-Strike, and is the final season of Pro League up to this point. After the completion of Season 17, as teams eagerly awaited to revisit Malta, ESL released an update to the league, affecting date changes and slot distribution. Gone was the conference stage, and now the league would compose of the usual 15 partner teams, 3 qualifying via their ESL ranking, 2 qualifying via the upcoming Challenger lands in Melbourne and Hanover, 6 through ESL Challenger League in their respective regions, 2 through qualifiers, 3 via their ESL World Ranking, and 4 via the ESL National Championship. And this was the finalized list of teams. As teams are prepping to begin competition of the new game, there was another wave of roster changes happening to teams. After declining results, Glaive is moved to the bench on Astralis along with Zipix and Altex to make way for Stair and Borup. Furrier acquire Fallen along with Cello, both from Imperial. Na'Vi with the biggest and most daring move, benched their core players Electronic and Perfecto along with NPL to make way for Alexi B, JL, and Ema from NIP, Apex, and Gamer Legion respectively. Na'Vi would now communicate exclusively in English, with the Russian players Electronic and Perfecto moving over to C9, who would hope to revamp their entire roster. Vitality would bench Dupree and bring in Flames from OG. Liquid would switch to a European team as they lose Nitro, who retires, and Elige, who was acquired by Complexity, and bring in Rainwaker and Patsy. Mouse would reacquire their former academy player Sui from Gamer Legion, who had proven himself as a worthy IGL after taking Gamer Legion to the finals of the Paris Major. Mouse would also promote Jim Fat from Mouse NXT, benching JDC in the process. And many, many more roster changes, both big and small. Thankfully, the group stage and playoff stage were left untouched, with the 4 triple elimination brackets set to begin. From Group A, the teams to qualify were Vitality, Movistar Riders, Astralis, and Furia. Group B ended with Ents, Big, Mouse, and Monte qualifying. Group C consisted of Na'Vi, FaZe Clan, Fnatic, and 9Z. And lastly, Group D qualifiers were G2, Complexity, Virtus Pro, and Eternal Fire. Virtus Pro can now use their organization name due to ESL lifting the sanction on them. These were our playoff contenders, and like always, the top teams would wait patiently as the others competed to progress. Day 1 of the playoffs, and an SDY-led Monte fought hard against Fnatic, closing it out 2-1. While Device and BlameF put on a great performance for their team, Eternal Fire's overall teamwork was superior, and they swept Astralis 2-0. 9Z managed to upset Virtus Pro in the closest series yet across all 3 maps, winning both maps in 16-14 fashion. Lastly, Mouse made easy work of Furia, ending both maps 16-4 and 16-5. The following day was the next round of playoffs, and it was also the official release of Counter-Strike 2. ESL polled teams mid-playoffs if they would want to switch and finish the tournament on the new game, but teams chose to deliver one last performance on the beloved game. And Monte would continue their run onto the quarterfinals after a 2-1 series with powerful form from World 2K. Eternal Fire would best the big players, sweeping them following a comeback on Vertigo and victory on Anubis. Movistar put an end to 9Z's run at the end of a 3-map series on Ancient. Lastly, the Young Mouse demolished returning victors FaZe Clan, maintaining the lead all the way through Mirage, not allowing them to win a single round in the second half of Map 2. The last quarterfinals of the Pro League are here, with their matches being Monte vs Vitality, Navi vs Eternal Fire, ENCE vs Movistar, and G2 vs Mouse. The loss to Dupree on Vitality was felt this series, with Monte eliminating the #1 team in the world out of competition and moved right along to the semifinals. Navi and ENCE, however, would put an end to the fantastic runs of both Eternal Fire and Movistar, sweeping both of their competitors. Lastly, in the closest series of the round, G2 and Mouse fought across 59 rounds in the first 2 maps. However, on map 3, Mouse overtook the second half and closed it out 16-7. In another Monte vs Navi rematch since the Paris Major, this time Navi would be the winners, continuing their 2-0 streak from the day before. Up next, the experienced Snappy was no match against the young mind of Sui, who, much like the day before, closed it out in 3 maps against the older team. The first grand finals for either team are under their newly revamped lineups, and disappointingly, Navi would not keep up with Mouse, despite numerous opportunities to in crucial rounds.
Oh, the flash front bathrooms blinds Jimpat as he's trying to get this kill, but it's an instant headshot. Alexi stuck behind truck. He gets a little more damage in, Bit slides out, dies to the hands of Jimmy, and Simple called out inside of the smoke. Clear the board, clear Navi out of this one.
In the first clean sweep grand finals that the league had seen in a while, Mouse had taken the concept of bringing up players from the academy team and proved with results that the idea was beneficial, as they were now winners of the last season of ESL Pro League for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. This would be the first Tier 1 win for 4 out of the 5 players on the team, and the first win for the organization in 3 years. And from here, Counter-Strike would switch their play over to the new installation, effectively ending competition on Global Offensive for good. Next season of Pro League will certainly be the beginning of something special, such as the original Pro League winner was all the way back in 2014. 9 years later, and Counter-Strike is still breathing alive and well, with more players and teams entering the scene, eager to become another part of the game's history.